Crimson pooled beneath David as Officer Miller stood above him, pistols still smoking. 5 miles away, Colonel Nathaniel Carter got the call about his only child. The seasoned Navy SEAL officer closed his eyes, lifted his secure phone, and set in motion the contingency strategy he had quietly built years earlier. Before we unravel this shocking tale of corruption and accountability, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Hit subscribe and stand with this community dedicated to truth. You're about to witness how one grieving father weaponized his training to dismantle a corrupt system from within. David Carter had lived cautiously, raised as the son of Colonel Nathaniel Carter, a decorated SEAL with 3 decades of combat service. David endured countless lessons about surviving as a black man in America. On a humid Thursday evening, the 21-year-old pre-med junior at Georgetown University drove through the affluent Willow Creek district to pick up his girlfriend Serena. His vehicle, a sleek car gifted by his parents for graduating high school, instantly caught the eye of Officer Gregory Miller, a 44-year-old patrolman circling the neighborhood. Known for his hostility and habit of escalating encounters in so-called high-risk areas, Miller immediately profiled David as suspicious and followed him, searching for a flimsy reason to stop him. The truth was damning. Miller had accumulated a thick file of citizen complaints in his 17-year career, nearly all alleging racial targeting or excessive force. Each case had been buried by supervisors or dismissed during quiet reviews. Now he stalked David's vehicle for blocks until a delayed signal turn provided his manufactured excuse for a stop. As red and blue lights flashed behind him, David pulled over carefully, aligning his car perfectly against the curb along Birchwood Lane, a manicured avenue of stately homes. He remembered everything his father drilled into him: hands visible, move deliberately, announce every action, be courteous yet firm, and always understand his rights. It was a script for survival. Miller approached with his hand already on his weapon, an aggressive posture he never took with white motorists. His brows lifted slightly at seeing a sharp, well-dressed black man inside such a polished car. David sat calmly, hands steady on the steering wheel, and addressed the officer with respect, careful to betray no agitation or fear. The officer demanded license and registration without ever explaining the alleged infraction. "Do you know why I stopped you?" he asked, his tone sharp, as if baiting for a mistake. "No, sir," David answered steadily. "I wasn't aware of any traffic violation." The politeness felt like defiance to Miller, who perceived deference as insolence. Miller's irritation deepened. The notion that this kid, though legally an adult, would question his authority lit a fire of anger. "You were driving suspiciously," Miller snapped, tossing out a vague charge. Then, in a voice thick with bias, he added, "You don't belong around here." The implication struck familiar. Black men don't belong in privilege. On a porch nearby, Helen Marsh, a 70-year-old retired nurse, noticed the tense encounter. She had lived in Willow Creek for decades and sensed something was off. Quietly, she raised her phone and began recording. "Step out of the car," Miller barked, voice rising. David's training urged him to stay composed as his pulse raced. "May I ask why, officer?" David inquired, steady though anxious. To Miller, the measured question was ultimate disrespect. In a flash, he drew his gun, pointing it through the driver's window. "Get out of the car now," he screamed, rage twisting his features. David slowly lifted both hands, announcing every movement, praying it would calm the storm. As David reached to open the door, his leather wallet slid off his lap onto the floor mat. Reflexively, he leaned down, speaking clearly, "Just grabbing my ID." But Miller had already chosen violence. 3 thunderous shots cracked in succession. Helen screamed as David collapsed forward against the wheel, his shirt quickly staining red. Miller froze, weapon still pointed, as if shocked by his own decision. Training kicked in, and he radioed with chilling calm. "Shots fired, suspect down, reach for something." No attempt at aid, no urgency to help. He stood stoically while David's life ebbed away inches from his hands. Helen kept her phone steady, tears in her eyes. The retired nurse's video captured Miller's indifference, the casual stance, and his unwavering grip on the firearm. Minutes later, paramedics rushed in, but quickly declared David deceased at the scene. Only then did Miller holster his weapon and rifle through David's belongings. He uncovered the student's ID alongside a military dependent card, a discovery that unnerved him. The officer didn't yet know the name Carter, but the Navy connection gave him pause. Military families had clout, networks, and power not easily silenced. Meanwhile, Helen uploaded her footage online. Within the hour, the clip of an officer gunning down an unarmed, compliant young man was spreading rapidly, primed to ignite a firestorm. But unlike countless other tragedies, this one involved the son of Colonel Nathaniel Carter. 30 years of military service had afforded him influence, allies, and reach beyond ordinary citizens. While the internet buzzed with outrage, a father was already calculating. Colonel Carter sat in his command office, reviewing files when the call came. He recognized the city code instantly, though the number was unfamiliar. Instinctively, he braced himself before answering. "Colonel Carter," came a woman's voice, "this is Detective Laura Green with the Metropolitan Police Department. There's been an incident involving your son, David." The words blurred. "Officer involved shooting, pronounced dead. Investigation pending. Standard procedure. Cold, practiced, devastating." 30 years of training kept Carter upright, though grief threatened to crush him. He thanked the detective with unnatural calm, promising to handle arrangements. After hanging up, he allowed himself 60 seconds of raw emotion. In that time, memories stormed through. Toddler David splashing in a pool, teenage David questioning injustice, graduate David beaming with ambition. When the watch on his wrist beeped, he shut down the grief, sealing it in a chamber of discipline. Now was time for action. Carter had endured racism throughout his career, rising through excellence and grit, and he had anticipated this day, not exactly, but enough to prepare a response. He called it Protocol Phoenix. His first call went to Commander Rafael Ortiz, longtime comrade and second in command. "Raf," he said when Ortiz answered, "Phoenix is active, David." The single word conveyed everything. Ortiz's voice sharpened instantly. "Understood. Contacts going out now." 35 minutes, Carter replied. "Establish at my residence. Full kit." No sympathy exchanged, just mission clarity. The second call was to Angela Price, a renowned civil rights attorney Carter had retained for years, waiting for this scenario. "Miss Price," Carter said, "we discussed a potential situation. It's now active." Her voice steadied. "I've seen the footage. I'm sorry for your loss. We're mobilizing." Carter outlined strict demands: relentless legal pursuit, no theatrics, only precision. Price agreed and requested direct intelligence from his network. "You'll have it within the hour," Carter assured. All the while, he was steering his vehicle home, his mind compartmentalizing grief into fuel. Every turn of the wheel brought him closer to war footing. His suburban house would transform into a command center before nightfall. When he arrived, Ortiz was already there with a carefully chosen team of 5. Each carried themselves with unmistakable military bearing despite civilian clothes. Familiar faces greeted Carter with sharp nods, not condolences. They included Major Robert Gaines from Army Rangers, Chief Petty Officer Victor Morales, Intelligence Officer Dana Kim, and Marcus Doc Ellison, a combat medic. Among them also stood Sergeant Carla Ruiz, a communications specialist already wiring encrypted systems through Carter's office. No words of comfort were exchanged yet. Every member understood their true condolence would be victory. Protocol Phoenix had begun not as vengeance, but as a meticulously planned campaign against corruption itself. The commander's grief had found its weapon. The atmosphere inside the house felt more like a forward operating base than a quiet home. Maps, laptops, and encrypted radios hummed as tasks divided seamlessly. Ortiz directed operational flow, while Ruiz secured comms. Gaines scouted intelligence feeds. Dana Kim monitored online chatter as the video spread. Each soldier knew their role. their commander's pain fueling their focus. Colonel Carter stood in silence for a moment, scanning the faces of his trusted circle. Each had served with him, bled beside him, or owed their life to his command. Race, service branch, politics, none of it mattered. They were family forged by war, bound by loyalty, and now they were united by his son's unjust death. Outside, neighbors whispered as strange vehicles appeared, unaware of the storm brewing inside. Within those walls, grief hardened into strategy. Colonel Carter issued assignments with clinical precision, his voice unwavering. This wasn't just about David anymore. It was about dismantling a culture that had allowed Miller's bullet to fire unchecked. Protocol Phoenix pulsed alive, mission underway. Angela Price called back within the hour, her legal team already drafting motions and assembling evidence. She confirmed the video's virality. It was climbing across networks, drawing national attention. "We'll press every angle," she promised. Carter replied, "Methodical pressure, nothing reckless. They expect chaos. We'll give them order, precision, and truth sharp enough to cut steel." Doc Ellison placed a quiet hand on Carter's shoulder for a brief second, the closest thing to comfort. No words passed, none were needed. Everyone in the room knew the pain would remain locked away until justice was served. The colonel's silence was not weakness, but the calm before a meticulously planned storm. Hours earlier, Carter had been simply a father. Now he was again the commander, steering warriors into battle. Except this battlefield was not overseas. It was inside America's flawed justice system. With Phoenix activated, every ally, every resource, every lesson from 30 years of service would be brought to bear. The enemy was corruption itself. The hum of encrypted devices filled the house. Ruiz confirmed secure channels established. Ortiz updated the team, first wave of contacts responding. Gaines had already identified pressure points inside the police department. Dana Kim tracked trending narratives online. Carter absorbed it all, grief buried deep. For now, mission eclipsed mourning. For now, action was survival. By then, the transformation was complete. A quiet suburban home had become command central. Humming with disciplined urgency, the colonel's allies stood ready, professionals tempered by fire and loyalty. No condolences yet. They all knew the mission was condolence enough. Protocol Phoenix was fully alive, its heart fueled by loss, its soul committed to justice. Nathaniel ushered his people into the dining room, the table cleared of everything except maps and laptops. His voice was even as he began. "Thank you all for coming so fast. My son David was gunned down today by a police officer at a so-called routine stop. There is footage proving the act was unjustified. The shooter is Gregory Miller, 44, of the Metropolitan Police," Nathaniel said, clicking a remote. Miller's personnel file and photo appeared projected on the wall. "Our mission: total justice pursued by legal, media, and intelligence channels. This is not revenge. This is not violence. We'll expose a man and the broken system shielding him." "Are we clear?" he asked. Heads nodded in silence. Nathaniel continued assigning tasks. Ortiz would coordinate field operators and oversee surveillance. Major Kim would direct intelligence, digging into Miller's record and systemic misconduct. Gaines would handle law enforcement contacts willing to whisper truths. Dr. Ellison would scrutinize medical evidence. Ruiz would maintain encrypted comms and monitor public sentiment online. As he spoke, Nathaniel's phone vibrated endlessly with messages from allies, condolences, offers of resources, and willingness to act. Within mere hours of receiving the worst call of his life, the colonel had mobilized more than 20 veterans and active operatives. Some converged directly on his home. Others moved into positions near Miller's precinct and residence. These were not reckless vigilantes chasing revenge. They were disciplined operators, masters of reconnaissance, counterintelligence, and information warfare. Their arsenal was not rifles, but data, truth, and strategy. By the time dusk settled, Protocol Phoenix was running at full tempo. Miller's neighborhood had new tenants, cars with vantage points and electronic eyes studying his every motion. Miller himself remained oblivious. He could not have fathomed that he had become the subject of the most intricate, high level operation ever directed at one local cop. Soon he would learn what it meant to kill the wrong young black man. For now, though, he strode into his precinct, nerves still buzzing from the gunfire. Adrenaline raced as he entered the bustling station. Yet Miller noticed something peculiar. His colleagues avoided his gaze. Captain Frank Reynolds, his supervisor and longtime drinking companion, quickly pulled him aside. "Greg, we need to get in front of this," Reynolds said, his heavy face uncharacteristically grave. Miller bristled. "Cap, I know what I'm doing." "Then tell me everything," Reynolds ordered. Miller leaned back, defensive. The kid was suspicious in a car too flashy for the neighborhood. "I approached," he mouthed off, then reached for something. "I followed procedure," Reynolds frowned. "There's video, Greg." A neighbor was filming. Already online, cold dread churned in Miller's gut. "What does it show?" "Haven't seen it yet," Reynolds admitted, "but word is, it looks bad." "Doesn't matter. We'll handle it." He mentioned calling Gregory Simmons, the union's go-to attorney. Miller exhaled relief. Simmons had buried countless cases against cops. The captain laid out the script. Administrative leave, internal affairs, the same rehearsed cycle. Stick to feared for my life. Within half an hour, Simmons walked in, crisp suit gleaming, lips curled into his trademark smirk. He scanned Miller's statement, striking phrases and adding new ones. "You didn't shoot a suspect," Simmons corrected smoothly. "You discharged your weapon, responding to a perceived lethal threat. You weren't emotional. You acted for public safety." Miller nodded obediently, repeating the words. Simmons' lessons weren't new. Miller had survived this process twice before, both times involving black civilians who dared complain about his force. Those files had disappeared into bureaucratic voids. Once the paperwork was sanitized, Miller was sent home, told to stay quiet, avoid cameras, and trust the union machine. He walked out with rehearsed calm. The ride back to Ridgewood Estates felt like a return to safety. His middle-class enclave welcomed him with manicured lawns and tidy driveways. Tension drained as he reminded himself. The system had always protected him. Sure, the video nagged at the edges of his mind, but Simmons would smear it, twist it, and bury the outrage. Lauren, his wife, waited at the door, scrub top still on from her shift at the dental office, her hair tied carelessly back. "Is it true?" she demanded as he set his keys down. "Facebook says you shot a college kid." Miller sighed heavily. "It's being handled." He was acting shady, driving a car worth more than our house. Lauren's eyes narrowed. "They're saying he was unarmed, that he was just reaching for his ID. The video looks terrible, Greg." Miller's face darkened. "Since when do you believe that garbage online over me? You know how these people act. Mouthy, entitled, always trouble." His voice rose sharply until their daughter, Emma, 16, stepped nervously into the hall. "Dad, what's going on?" "What video?" she asked, eyes wide. Miller softened his tone instantly. "Nothing, sweetheart. Just noise about work. Go finish your homework." Reluctantly, Emma retreated. Miller poured himself a tall glass of bourbon and dropped onto the couch. Lauren sat stiff across from him. "This isn't going to vanish this time, is it?" she whispered. He swallowed hard liquor, shaking his head. "It always does. The department knows how to shield its own. Media will move on." His phone buzzed endlessly with texts from colleagues, some offering solidarity, others nervously forwarding links to the viral video. When he finally opened it, his pulse stuttered. The footage showed everything: hands visible, wallet falling. No threat. Worst of all, it captured his indifference, standing coldly as David bled out. No aid given, just a drawn gun and dead eyes. Comments beneath the post screamed for arrest. His phone vibrated with outrage until he turned it off completely. That night, as Lauren twisted restlessly beside him, Miller stared at the ceiling, his father's voice echoing. These people need to know their place. His father's bitterness, lost factory job, Resentment twisted into racism had imprinted on him as a child. Those teachings had metastasized into his career. The broken arm of a black teen planted evidence on a black shop owner, both buried with hush money and sealed court files. Patterns repeated, cloaked in power. Near midnight, headlights swept across his walls. Another car, then another. Outside, unfamiliar vehicles lingered on his street. A man walking his dog stared too long at the house. Miller's instincts screamed danger. Something was different this time. He didn't know it yet, but the hunters had already surrounded him, and their weapons weren't guns. They were truth. Do you stand with officers like Miller who abuse their badge, or do you demand accountability? Comment justice if you believe police must face the same laws as everyone else. Like this video if you support reform, and subscribe to follow this unfolding battle where one father's strategy will shake an entire system. Could a decorated Navy commander dismantle a culture designed to protect its enforcers? While Miller tossed restlessly, Colonel Carter's house had become a war room. The dining room table transformed into a tactical hub covered in laptops, cables, and maps. 27 operators were already inside, more en route, each bringing unmatched expertise and iron discipline. Master Chief Victor Morales, a towering figure with 27 years of covert operations, led the surveillance team. His crews had already moved into Miller's neighborhood, renting homes under shell companies, setting up cameras and sensors. Eyes on all approaches to the target residence, Morales reported crisply. Technical package deploying now. Subject has no ID. We're ghosts, Commander Captain Robert Gaines, broad-shouldered and sharp-eyed, coordinated with friendly insiders inside the police force. Officially, they're closing ranks, he said, scanning encrypted updates. But I've got 3 who hate Miller, willing to leak. One says his files stacked with racial complaints, all buried. Major Dana Kim, her expertise in digital warfare unmatched, was already inside restricted personnel systems. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Confirmed. 8 excessive force complaints. Black and Hispanic civilians all suppressed. Every single one settled or dismissed. The pattern's undeniable. We'll weaponize it. Carter absorbed the revelation, jaw tight. Beside her, Dr. Ellison studied early medical reports. From trajectory and footage, first shot shredded the aorta. Fatal. The others. Intentional follow-ups. Nathaniel nodded grimly, his soldier's mind parsing the facts clinically. He had buried his grief beneath layers of command. This was no longer about a single trigger pull. This was about the rot beneath a badge, a system that had enabled Miller for years. And now that system had collided with Protocol Phoenix. Outside, Miller clutched a glass of bourbon, unaware that shadows had already woven nets around him. Every word, every step, every file from his past was now being dissected by Carter's network. What Miller thought was protection was really a brittle shell. Protocol Phoenix wasn't just operational, it was inevitable, precise, and merciless. Inside the Carter household, tension was electric, but organized. Laptops displayed maps of Ridgewood estates. Surveillance feeds flickered with live images of Miller's home. Radios crackled in secure channels. Every operator knew their role intimately. For them, this was simply another mission. Except this time, the target was domestic corruption masquerading as law enforcement. Morales leaned forward, voice low but steady. We've got visual confirmation on his routines. Subject arrived home at 1920 hours. Wife and daughter present. Lights out on second floor. Unknown vehicles canvassing street are ours. His calmness carried weight. If he sneezes, we'll know. Around the table, heads nodded. Soldiers treating a suburban home like hostile terrain. Gaines provided updates on internal leaks. At least 3 officers will testify anonymously if needed. Miller's reputation inside the force is poison, hidden only by the Union's shadow. If we pull hard enough, cracks will spread. Donna Kim intercepted chatter online. The video's trending across multiple platforms. Narrative control slipping from the department. Public rage is swelling. Doc Ellison placed files on the table, his voice clinical. Trajectory suggests first bullet severed the aorta. Time to death, seconds. Additional shots unnecessary for neutralization. That shows deliberate intent. It's damning medically, legally. Silence filled the room as the weight of his words settled. Colonel Carter gave a sharp nod. We'll use every detail. The operators knew the mission's essence. No bullets, no bombs, only truth sharpened like a blade. They were professionals, loyal not to vengeance, but to justice. Each had seen combat abroad. Now their battleground was American streets, their commander's grief the fuel for their discipline. The storm outside Miller's window was about to break. Major Kim raised her eyes from the screen. Confirmed. Miller's file is a goldmine. 8 complaints, all racially charged, all suppressed. Every incident fits the same profile. It's systematic. Her words cut the air. Carter stood tall, gaze sweeping the room. The operator straightened, knowing the next phase was imminent. Protocol Phoenix had teeth, and now it would bite. Everyone in the room grasped the near impossible control it took for a father who had just lost his child. Staff Sergeant Carla Ruiz tracked social feeds and breaking news on multiple screens. It's nationwide, Colonel, she reported. Over 2 million views already. Morning shows cued it. The footage leaves no room for doubt. Public sentiments overwhelmingly against the officer, Ruiz added. In a side office, civil rights attorney Angela Price coordinated with her team, drafting filings and playbooks. Emergency preservation motions are in, she briefed Nathaniel. We're advancing criminal referrals and a civil action. The wrongful death suit names Miller, the department, the city, and the union. Nathaniel approved with a firm nod, reiterating the boundary lines. Every step stands on law and fact, he said. No shortcuts, no theatrics. We either win by legitimate means or we do not move at all. Price agreed, already arranging subpoenas and litigation holds while mapping strategic filings to multiple jurisdictions to box in delays. Commander Rafael Ortiz oversaw the influx of operators and materiel, slotting people by specialty. A PSYOPs unit led by former Army specialist Daniel Rivera designed pressure campaigns to unsettle Miller without any direct contact. We want him constantly aware of observation, Rivera explained. Uncertainty and isolation are our leverage. Never threats, never lines crossed. Light touch disruption, Rivera continued. Irregular vehicle passes, sporadic late-night landline calls, unfamiliar faces drifting through his bubble. Enough to interrupt sleep cycles, not enough to violate statutes. Ortiz nodded, satisfied. The strategy would harvest stress, erode confidence, and amplify scrutiny, legally careful, psychologically calibrated, and deniable because it never ventured beyond lawfulness. We've rented short-term units on his block, Ortiz updated. Teams joined the neighborhood Facebook group, filed polite introductions, and established routines with dogs and jogs. He'll feel watched without tracing the source. Near 3 a.m., Nathaniel stepped outside alone. Cool air cut his cheeks. He stared up at stars his boy would never see again. Ortiz joined beside him, silent at first. 2 decades serving with you, he murmured. I've never seen this level of precision so fast. David would be proud. Nathaniel's shoulders tightened at his son's name. I gave him the talk, he said softly. Hands visible. Slow moves. Yes, sir. No, sir. Humiliating, but alive. His voice stayed level, brittle at the edges. I was wrong, Raph. He did everything right. That officer still fired 3 rounds. Ortiz set a steady hand on his commander's shoulder. A rare breach of formality born of friendship and war. Then we changed the system, he said simply. That's the heart of Phoenix. By first light, the operation had widened. Surveillance covered the precinct, the district attorney's office, and city hall corridors. Intel cells profiled decision makers, mapping loyalties and pressure points. Media specialists scheduled disciplined releases. Tech teams hardened communications and vacuumed digital traces. Every lane advanced in parallel, synchronized like a metronome under Nathaniel's measured cadence. Financial analysts followed money routes, settlements, defense funds, insurance pools, showing how payouts insulated misconduct. Spreadsheets became topographic maps of influence. As the sun climbed, Officer Gregory Miller remained oblivious to the machine closing in, unaware he had triggered the most sophisticated intelligence effort ever focused on one cop by killing the only son of a decorated commander. The protection he'd relied upon was about to meet something new, a father with training, reach, and patience, determined to demand justice by every lawful mechanism available. Day two dawned with Miller's skull throbbing. Too much whiskey, too little sleep. The house phone had rung intermittently all night. Pickups met silence, then tidy clicks. Activists, he'd muttered, though the spacing between calls felt engineered. When he peeled back the bedroom curtain, dread surged. The quiet cul-de-sac had transformed. Satellite trucks bookended the block. Reporters rehearsed camera. Unfamiliar sedans idled along curbs, occupants watching his windows. Signs appeared in small clusters. Justice for David and charge killer cops. He dropped the curtain and grabbed his phone. 16 missed calls, notifications stacked like debris. He dialed Captain Reynolds. "Frank, what is this?" Reporters, protesters. My lawn Reynolds sounded drained. "It's bad, Greg." The clip hit every national broadcast. The kid's father is a high-ranking SEAL with connections. Calls from the mayor, governor, Pentagon. Chief convened an emergency meeting, Reynolds continued. "Union's backing you, on paper. Simmons says optics are rough." Miller sputtered. "Optics?" I pursued a suspicious vehicle, and he reached. What was I supposed to do? Silence stretched. Reynolds exhaled. "The video shows him announcing he's getting his ID. Hands visible. No medical aid afterward. Doesn't read well." Greg Miller hung up and sagged onto the mattress. Lauren appeared in the doorway, half frightened, half furious. "Bella's school called. Kids said awful things about her. I'm keeping her home." He nodded, mind racing. Leave the house and face cameras? Stay and watch the narrative calcify? A message pinged from a colleague. "Saw full video. You're on your own." The isolation pressed in as the doorbell rang. Lauren answered with the chain still latched. "Delivery for Officer Miller. Signature required." She brought him the envelope. Inside, civil papers. The Carter family had filed a wrongful death suit naming Miller, the department, the city, and the union. Damages sought. Millions. His hand trembled at the figure. News alerts cascaded across his screen, pairing the footage with profiles of Colonel Carter's service, David's academic record, and swelling calls for arrest. One headline froze him. Navy SEAL Colonel to address public. He flicked on the TV. There stood Nathaniel Carter in full dress uniform, medals bright under lights, grief honed into steel. The contrast gutted him, a decorated commander speaking soberly versus a cop hiding behind drawn curtains. Carter's voice carried controlled resolve. "My son David was exceptional, unarmed, compliant, and clearly communicating when Officer Miller chose to end his life. As Americans, we cannot accept a system that shields abuse. As a father, I will not rest." The statement contained no incendiary lines, no threats, only a calm pledge to pursue accountability through law. Somehow that restraint felt more dangerous than shouting. Through the afternoon, silence spread among Miller's peers. Messages stopped. The union advised him to disappear from view. Reynolds informed him that prior complaints were under renewed departmental review. Even closest friends were suddenly busy. Near 3, he attempted a grocery run. The garage door rose to a wall of cameras. Questions flew, flashes popped. He retreated, slammed the button, and ordered delivery. When the driver left, Miller spotted him snapping photos of the house before pulling away. Pressure mounted, granular and relentless. Lauren discovered a neighborhood petition urging the family to move for community safety. Bella showed her father classmates' posts labeling him a murderer. His brother called to cancel a planned visit. Not safe for the kids. Each rejection stacked like bricks forming a cell. The house felt smaller, the air denser, his options thinning. By evening, more unfamiliar vehicles had appeared. New dog walkers looped the block with practiced casualness. The sensation of being observed became a constant hum beneath his skin. He requested a patrol car. The dispatcher sounded harried. Resources are tied up with demonstrations downtown. Maybe tomorrow. The phrase landed like a door quietly locked. Night dropped. Miller field stripped, cleaned, and reassembled his personal firearms, laying them within reach. Every creak jolted him. In the kitchen, Lauren spoke low to avoid waking their daughter. I watched the entire clip, Greg. Why didn't you tell me? He said he was reaching for his wallet. Exact words. Her eyes were glassed with fury. Heat flooded his face. You don't know what it's like out there. Split-second judgment. Things look different in real time. Lauren shook her head, tears threatening. I've stood by you through everything, but this time the video is the truth, uncut. You saw a young black man in a nice car and decided he didn't belong? His hand twitched upward before he froze, horror catching up to impulse. Lauren recoiled, fear and disbelief mingling. I'm taking Emma to my sister's tomorrow, she whispered. We need space. He opened his mouth to argue when every light in the house blinked out at once. The block beyond their windows also vanished into darkness. Miller snatched his service pistol and moved to the window, breath tight. Outside, silhouettes drifted with unhurried confidence, as if they'd anticipated the outage. He could make out the red standby glows of cameras, lenses peering from parked cars. Somewhere down the street, a generator coughed to life, then settled into a quiet, steady rumble. He called the utility company. The line was jammed. He called Reynolds. Voicemail. He called the union rep. Voicemail. He paced the hallway, listening to the house breathe. Refrigerator silent, HVAC stilled, the muffled scuff of feet in the cul-de-sac like ghosts walking. Anxiety crawled up his spine and nested behind his ribs. Lauren flicked a flashlight on her phone, cheeks streaked with tears. This isn't normal, she whispered. Something's wrong. Miller stared at the blackout as if it were a verdict. He imagined headlines looping, lawyers sharpening filings, a commander speaking softly while building a siege. He'd believed the system was armor. It now felt like glass. Across town, Nathaniel's operators tracked the grid event on encrypted dashboards. No laws bent, no switches touched. The outage was municipal, routine, yet perfectly timed for psychological effect. Surveillance feeds rode battery backups. Notes flowed into Angela Price's repository. Every data point, calls, movements, posture, was captured for court and press, truth arranged like pieces on a board. In the war room, Ortiz kept the cadence. Rivera's team logged behaviors, window checks, pacing patterns, weapon handling, attempts at calls. Ruiz flagged trending stories and clipped hostile comments from Miller's past aliases. Gaines cultivated departmental insiders, confirming new reviews of old complaints. Protocol Phoenix advanced by inches, lawful, patient, and suffocatingly thorough. Back on Ridgewood Estates, the blackout felt endless. Miller's heartbeat thudded in his ears. He moved room to room, muzzle low, muttering procedures to quiet the panic. Lauren sat with Emma in the hallway, whispering reassurances she barely believed. Outside, shapes continued their measured circuits, indifferent to the dark. As if darkness were their element, minutes bled together. Miller checked the microwave clock out of habit, forgetting the power. He thought of the union lawyer's phrases, of Reynolds's warning, of the video's ruthless clarity. He imagined subpoenas, depositions, the slow unspooling of his career under lights he couldn't dim. Somewhere as a car door shut with deliberate softness. Exactly 37 minutes after the first flicker, the neighborhood hummed back to life, lights stuttering on, compressors spinning, screens rebooting. Miller lowered the pistol but didn't breathe easier. The silence that followed felt louder than the dark. He realized the power hadn't been the only thing cut. Whatever safety he'd trusted was gone too. When electricity snapped back, the street looked ordinary again. Porches glowing, televisions flickering. But Miller couldn't shake the sense that the outage was staged, a warning that someone else could choreograph his world. He stayed at the window till dawn, flinching at every silhouette, every tire hiss, every distant dog bark. By sunrise, the once swaggering officer felt besieged, confidence eroded, allies vanishing, security shattered. He still didn't know that a grieving father's elite network had engineered his isolation, needle by needle. Ask yourself, what would you do if the system that shielded you pivoted overnight to scrutinize you instead? Day three began. Under crushing pressure, the mayor stepped before microphones on City Hall's granite steps. We're committed to a thorough, transparent investigation into this tragic incident, Mayor Elena Phillips declared, carefully avoiding Miller's name. Cameras clicked. Questions flew. She offered an official face to public fury, promising openness without tethering herself to a sinking officer. Effective immediately, she continued, an independent review board will examine this case and the department's use of force policies. In his living room, Miller watched the speech, remembering when Phillips had praised his academy class as the city's guardians. Now she couldn't say his name aloud. That erasure felt colder than condemnation. Minutes later, a formal notice arrived. Unpaid administrative leave pending multiple investigations. The union, which had initially vowed unwavering support, now promised only limited counsel and zero public defense of his conduct. The familiar scaffold, contracts, politics, solidarity, creaked and buckled beneath him, every plank loosening as though pulled by invisible hands. He didn't know that the unfastening was deliberate. That morning, Colonel Nathaniel Carter secured a private meeting with Police Commissioner Harold Briggs, an invitation Briggs couldn't refuse given Carter's rank and the national spotlight. In wood-paneled quiet, Carter sat in full uniform, a sealed folder heavy on his lap. Commissioner, thank you for seeing me, Carter began, voice formal, steady. I'll be direct. My team compiled extensive documentation of Officer Miller's racially biased incidents and the department's pattern of concealment. He opened the folder. Briggs recognized confidential personnel materials instantly, photocopies of sealed complaints, internal notes, dates that shouldn't leave headquarters. We've identified 17 additional officers with similar records, Carter said evenly, along with the supervisory chain that insulated them. He didn't raise his voice or threaten. He offered a choice: partner with reform and survive, or be buried when the tide turned. Briggs, a political appointee with aspirations, understood perfectly. Ambition warred with fear. After a long breath, Briggs leaned in. What do you want? Carter listed terms: immediate suspension procedures for Miller, full cooperation with internal and external probes, and a public commitment to concrete reform benchmarks. Specifics mattered: dates, authorities, scope, not slogans, not delay. Real steps the city couldn't quietly reverse. By the time Carter departed, he had more than promises. He had a schedule. Within hours, Internal Affairs canvassed Miller's peers. Captain Frank Reynolds, reading the winds, recalculated. To salvage himself, he'd pivot. He would narrate years of concern, repackaging complicity as oversight, positioning himself as the reluctant supervisor who tried. Under questioning, Reynolds described complaints quietly buried, and footage never escalated. I tried to mentor him, he said, haloing his negligence, documented concerns through proper channels. He produced emails and memos conveniently rediscovered, paper shields stitched overnight. The new script cast him not as enabler, but as Cassandra, ignored by the machine. Across town, civil rights attorney Angela Price built dual cases with methodical precision. Her team collected witness statements, traced policy failures, and documented the department's negligence in keeping Miller on duty. At the DA's office, she pressed the cumulative weight, not only the video, but pattern evidence and corroborating officers. This is first degree, she argued. The district attorney had hesitated to prosecute a cop, but public anger, Price's binder of evidence, and the political vacuum around Miller proved irresistible. He announced a grand jury would be convened immediately. Momentum shifted from outrage to institution. Hearings, subpoenas, transcripts, machinery that once guarded officers now grinding toward charge sheets. Miller watched events spiral. Calls to colleagues died in voicemail. Private firms declined representation, citing conflicts and capacity. The union lawyer advised contemplating a plea if charges landed hard. Even Reynolds stopped answering. Cornered, Miller wandered darker forums, typing grievances to groups that embraced embattled cops. I did my job. I'm being sacrificed, replies poured in. Promises of patriots ready to stand guard, talk of caravans and rifles. Miller felt the first flicker of belonging in days. He didn't realize Major Dana Kim's intel cell had eyes on those channels. They forwarded screenshots, handles, and routing data to federal partners monitoring violent extremism. A new fuse lit. By evening, the house went quiet for real. Lauren took Emma to stay with family, unable to bear the tension and increasingly convinced by the footage. Neighbors organized a candlelight vigil for David at the park, deliberately visible from Miller's window. The pizza place refused delivery. Even conveniences were choosing sides now. Night pooled in the kitchen where Miller sat alone, service weapon on the table, contemplating the speed of collapse. The phone rang. He lunged for hope. "We know what you did," a calm voice said, then clicked off. Protester. Troll? Something else? The ambiguity shook him worse than a shouted threat. He checked locks twice, then a third time. Blinds lowered. Lamps dimmed. Every creak amplified in his chest. Across town candles guttered at the vigil, while Colonel Carter spoke briefly to parents clutching photos. No anger in his tone, only resolve. The crowd answered with silence, deeper than any chant could summon. Do you think officers face the same justice as civilians? Comment 1 if you believe consequences should match the crime, badge or not. Like this if you think Carter's surgical strategy beats chaotic protest alone. Subscribe to see how precision and law can unwind a system designed to protect its own. Day 4 punched Miller awake with a heavy thud on the driveway. Through a slit in the blinds, he saw it, murderer, sprayed in wet red paint across the concrete, glistening under new sun. Rage surged. He lifted the phone to call police, then laughed bitterly at the absurdity of reflex. He was the police until he wasn't. Across town, Carter's briefing paused when Captain Robert Gaines flagged the vandalism. "Sir, someone tagged Miller's driveway." Carter's jaw set. "Not ours," he said. "Remind everyone we operate inside the law. No damage, no threats. Find the source and sever any tie to us immediately." Miller, unaware of Carter's zero-tolerance order, treated the paint as escalation. He dragged furniture against front and back doors, stacked chairs beneath windows, and laid out firearms at choke points. He knew the preparations bordered on paranoia. Still, fear telescoped judgment until every shadow looked like intent, every whisper like footfall. The phone rang from an unknown number. "Officer Miller, Claire Dawson, District Attorney's Office. You're subpoenaed for grand jury tomorrow at 9. Non-appearance triggers a warrant." His mouth dried. "Tomorrow? Already?" Her voice stayed cool. "Acknowledgement recorded. Courier will deliver shortly." The system he'd trusted was suddenly a precise clock, ticking toward him. He called Union Counsel, Gregory Simmons. "You said weeks," he snapped. Simmons sighed. "The timeline accelerated. The video hurts, and Captain Reynolds is cooperating." The word landed like a strike. "Cooperating how?" Miller demanded. Pause. "Providing documents about prior incidents and his attempts to correct your conduct. He's positioning as a whistleblower, ignored by command. The betrayal hollowed him." Simmons continued, voice lowered. "Listen, with the evidence stack, video, history, internal testimony, you should seriously consider a plea." Miller ended the call, mind whirring. The structure wasn't merely collapsing, it was reassembling itself to crush him. He'd been a protected cog. Now he was the offering. The doorbell chimed. Through the peephole. "Courier," envelope in hand. He cracked the door, snatched the packet, relocked everything. The subpoena confirmed 9 a.m. Courtroom details, admonitions in legalese. Panic tightened his chest. Strategy? None. Allies? Evaporated. Options? Shrinking. The house felt like a box, and the air kept thinning. Desperate, he dialed Reynolds directly. Frank, it's me. I heard you're talking to Internal Affairs. The captain's tone arrived clipped and careful. I'm doing what I have to do, Greg. You crossed a line. I can't cover for you anymore. In a single sentence, 15 years of camaraderie snapped like dry twine. Miller's fear ignited into anger. Cover for me? You greenlit everything. You laughed when that dealer left in an ambulance. You coached my reports to dodge scrutiny. Don't reinvent yourself as a reformer now. The pause stretched. When Reynolds replied, his voice had the cold smoothness of counsel. Watch your words. Phones aren't private. Across the city, Colonel Carter's team logged each institutional turn, mayoral statements, subpoenas, internal interviews, aligning them with their pressure timeline. Nothing sensational, nothing sloppy, just relentless legality forcing choices. Angela Price finalized witness lists. Dana Kim queued new releases. Gaines groomed cooperative officers. Phoenix didn't roar. It tightened inch by patient inch. Miller stared at the subpoena as if it might blink. He imagined a fluorescent room, jurors stone-faced, screens replaying the clip frame by frame. He pictured headlines crawling, might-have-beens dissolving. He had worn the badge like armor for years. Under these lights, it felt like tinfoil, crinkled, thin, and painfully loud. He returned the furniture barricades to place, then moved them again, unable to decide which direction danger would come from. Outside, cars idled where no one idled before. A dog lifted its head toward his window, then trotted on. The ordinary world continued, indifferent to a man suffocating in his own living room. I'm advising you to watch what you say, Reynolds repeated, voice remote and rehearsed, especially on the phone. These calls may be monitored. The line clicked dead. Miller stood alone with the dial tone tunneling through him. He finally understood. Not only was protection gone, now the system was gathering receipts. Then, in a voice tailored for anyone listening, Reynolds added, I've always pushed officers toward proper procedure and documented concerns about your conduct. Miller felt the trap spring shut. Reynolds was building a record in real time, shaping a narrative that salvaged himself while painting Miller as reckless, undisciplined, and beyond coaching. Fury detonated. Miller launched into a drunken torrent. Threats, accusations, half-remembered justifications, each sentence more damaging than the last. Reynolds let him rant, saying nothing, letting the phone capture it all. When Miller finally winded down, the captain's reply was clipped. This conversation is over. Obey the subpoena. Get competent counsel. Click. Silence. The line died, leaving Miller heaving in a fortress of stacked furniture and loaded guns. A news alert flashed. Grand jury convened in killing of Navy SEAL's son. Side by side, photos filled the screen. David in his cap and gown, smile wide. Miller in a rigid uniform portrait. The contrast crushed whatever defense remained. As day bled into evening, he drank hard, beer to whiskey, resentment to rage. He logged onto extremist forums that fed his grievance, where anonymous avatars promised protection and vengeance. They framed him as a martyr to political correctness, a fallen soldier abandoned by weak leadership, and vowed to mobilize in his name. Stumbling deeper, Miller posted his address and urged armed allies to hold the line. They're sacrificing me to appease elites, he typed. I did my job. Time to show them we won't be thrown away. The replies multiplied, caravans, radios, rifles. In his buzzed brain, the chorus sounded like certainty. He didn't know Major Dana Kim's intel cadre had eyes on the thread, capturing screenshots, routing data, and handles. Commander, Dana messaged, Miller's inviting armed civilians to his location. He's severely impaired and escalating online. Colonel Carter's answer landed instantly: contain without contact, shield civilians, and escalate to local command before anything combustible sparked. Dispatchers flagged the threat. Squad cars formed rolling checkpoints, questioning arrivals, turning most away. Still, a handful slipped through. Open carry enthusiasts posting up behind trucks, radios hissing, sidearms visible. Inside, Miller kept posting, darker and louder. If they come for me, I won't go alone. Algorithms flagged it, sirens in code. The warnings elevated the response. By midnight, the quiet legal siege had mutated into a standoff. SWAT ringed the perimeter. Negotiators staged a mobile command. Nearby homes got evacuation knocks. The neighborhood became a chessboard. Armed supporters in the inner ring, police beyond, and at the volatile center, a drunk man with guns and grievances. Miller barricaded himself and paced, weapon in hand. Outside, a few loyalists lingered, whispering tactics into radios, glancing at the sky for helicopters. The system that once shielded him had flipped, its spotlight turning him into the target. His brittle identity splintered under the weight of that reversal. Cop to quarry. Floodlights bloomed across the facade. Rotor wash pulsed overhead. Miller gripped his service pistol and waited, too wired to think, too intoxicated to plan. Fear braided with anger, until both felt the same. Dawn would come, and with it, the reckoning he'd spent a career believing would never touch him. Day 5 arrived wrapped in sirens. Streets locked behind barricades, armored vehicles crouched like steel bulls at intersections. Negotiators raised a tented post 2 blocks out. News choppers choreographed above, feeding a country hungry for spectacle. Inside, Miller finally crashed at 4 a.m., only to bolt awake 2 hours later to amplified orders. Gregory Miller, this is Captain Gerald Mercer. Special response, the bullhorn boomed. You are surrounded. A grand jury has indicted you for first-degree murder. We have a warrant. Exit unarmed, hands visible. Miller staggered to the blinds, skull pounding. Only 2 supporters remained, hugging engine blocks. The rest had melted under floodlights and fear. Panic warred with rage. 5 days from patrol cop to indicted suspect. The same machine that once buffered him, now tightened like a noose. His phone blinked with missed calls. One unknown number had rung repeatedly overnight. The bullhorn continued, calm, relentless, describing safe surrender. The unknown number buzzed again. He answered. Mr. Miller, a steady voice said. Colonel Nathaniel Carter Miller nearly dropped the phone. Why would I talk to you? He snarled, alcohol still fogging judgment. You did this to me? Carter's tone didn't waver. I'm David's father. I might be your best chance to survive today. The department authorized me to assist, so you can get revenge? Miller spat. Carter exhaled. If I wanted revenge, we wouldn't be talking. I want justice. I've managed standoffs. My goal is 0 casualties. Walk out alive and face court. No heroic last stands. No funerals for neighbors who tried to help with sidearms. The authority cut through. Why help me? Miller asked, quieter. You must hate me. Carter paused. I hate what you did. I hate the system that taught you you'd never answer for it. I hate that my son is gone while you breathe. Adding your death won't restore him or fix the culture that made you possible. Carter's voice shifted to briefing cadence. Your supporters are pinging more armed groups. If they breach this perimeter, you'll be at the epicenter of crossfire. We're running out of time. Miller checked another window. Police lines thicker now. Armored units repositioning. His defiance stuttered as the tactical picture sharpened to inevitability. My options? He asked. Indictment's first degree. Life or worse. I'm a headline, not a human. Carter stayed even. You're not wrong. This case is bigger than you, but forcing an entry or stepping out, firing guarantees one outcome. Your death won't help your wife or child. It will only scar them. Permanently, my family, Miller whispered. Have you spoken to them? I have, Carter said. They're safe with relatives, watching this live, terrified you'll die today. Is that what you want? Your daughter's last memory to be a feed of you bleeding on the lawn? A long silence. The question landed like a hammer. The last 5 days flooded him. Video frames, headlines, whispers from teammates gone silent. Beneath the alcohol and spite, something finally cracked. What happens if I give up? Carter outlined the steps. Unload, secure the weapons, follow instructions, walk out empty-handed. He pledged to monitor custody, to prevent retaliatory accidents by officers or inmates. Miller's phone vibrated, supporters urging him to stand firm, raving about government plots. Carter sensed hesitation tightening again. Those men don't care about you, he said. They care about their narrative. They'll let you die to feed it. Ask yourself if you're willing to die for people who only want your spectacle. As if on cue, one agitated supporter popped a warning shot skyward. Police reacted immediately, returning controlled fire, pushing the line, forcing armed civilians to scatter. Miller dove as glass tinked somewhere down the hall. Carter didn't raise his voice. Stay off the windows, Greg. Make a decision now. This is spiraling. The commander's crisis tone was steady, practiced, bridges in a storm. I have your wife and daughter on another line, he added. If you permit, I'll patch them through. Miller swallowed, nodded into the phone. A click, then Lauren's trembling voice. Rick, please. Please stop this. Come out. Don't make them hurt you. Then Emma's voice, small, raw. Daddy, I'm scared. Please don't get hurt. Please come home someday. The words slipped past anger and pride, cutting to the part of him that remembered soccer Saturdays and birthday candles. For the first time, he saw the scene through his daughter's eyes, and it was unbearable. Okay, he said, barely audible. I'll surrender. Carter moved like a conductor, alerting tactical command, confirming protocols, insisting on no extra force. He walked Miller through it, clear chambers, magazines out, safeties on, weapons in the bathtub, hands washed, pockets emptied. No surprises, no sudden moves, no chance for adrenaline to misread. Miller thumbed messages to the stragglers outside. Stand down. Leave now. Only one complied. The others melted into hedges and angles, stubborn fantasies still buzzing in their radios. Carter kept the rhythm steady, breathing, steps, timing aligned with negotiators. Every instruction had a purpose: protect lives, preserve evidence, end the scene cleanly. He stood in a plain t-shirt and jeans, nothing bulky to suggest a hidden weapon. The door creaked. Floodlights seared his skin. He stepped onto the porch with hands high, fingers spread. Somewhere beyond the glare, red dots dipped and disappeared. A voice guided him. Forward, stop, turn, kneel. Procedural choreography. Behind the cordon, cameras drank the moment. In the command tent, checklists ticked. Arrest team ready, medics staged, transport prepped. In a quiet corner, Angela Price logged timestamps for chain of custody. Dana Kim captured live feeds. The operation that began in grief now reached for a careful, lawful end to its most dangerous chapter. Miller's wrists clicked into steel. He didn't resist. He stared at the asphalt, at a blade of grass trembling in rotor wind. He thought of the lecture he gave rookies about control, judgment, restraint. He thought of David Carter's last words and the seconds that rewrote every story he'd told himself. They lifted him, guided him down steps he'd climbed 1,000 sober mornings as a uniformed man. Neighbors watched from porches, some crying, some stony. The cuffs were not the worst part. It was the knowledge that this finally was accountability arriving, late, imperfect but real. He had never expected it to knock. 2 blocks away, Colonel Carter watched through binoculars as the man who killed his son was placed into a transport van. No triumph crossed his face, only gravity. Protocol Phoenix had achieved its immediate aim without a single unlawful move. Justice would continue where it belongs, in court, under lights, with truth on record. Miller sat in the caged rear seat, the door thudding shut like a verdict. He exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd held since the shots 5 days earlier. Outside, The floodlights dimmed, barriers shifted, and the neighborhood exhaled. Inside the command post, Carter lowered the lenses and finally let himself breathe. His face held no triumph, only the hard calm of work finished. Commander Rafael Ortiz watched his friend carefully. "You just kept alive the man who took your son," he murmured. Colonel Nathaniel Carter lowered the binoculars, features unreadable. "Justice isn't revenge, Raf. It's accountability and change. Miller alive in court achieves more than Miller dead and sanctified," he added. As the transport rolled away, Carter turned to the team. "Phase 1 is complete. Now we make sure the process works properly. Evidence preserved, witnesses protected, pressure applied lawfully. We finish this the right way." The most volatile chapter had closed without more bloodshed, proof of a commander choosing systems over rage. 6 months after David Carter's death, a hushed courtroom waited as the foreperson stood. The trial had stretched 3 weeks, testimony from former colleagues and experts dismantling every claim the defense tried to raise. Gregory Miller, leaner and grayer from jail, stood beside a public defender, eyes fixed on tile. Cameras couldn't enter, but anticipation pressed like heat. The foreperson cleared her throat and read. Each word landed heavy, echoing against wood panels that had heard too many excuses, too few reckonings before. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Gregory Allen Miller, guilty of murder in the first degree." The statement rippled through the packed gallery. On the prosecution bench, Colonel Carter sat immobile in a dark suit. Beside him, Angela Price rested a steadying hand on his arm, professional, quiet, almost imperceptible. A week later, at sentencing, Judge Meera Patel addressed Miller directly. "You swore to protect this city," she said. "Instead, you let bias steer your power, ending the life of a promising young man who did nothing wrong." Her voice remained calm. "Life imprisonment without the possibility of parole." Before deputies led him away, Carter stepped to the lectern for his victim impact statement. He wore dress blues, medals catching courtroom light, a voice level. "My son David was 21, he began. He studied to heal people. He followed instructions at that stop as I trained him. Compliance didn't save him." He paused, gaze steady on Miller for the first time. "I must speak about more than our loss. Each abuse without consequence shreds trust between communities and the officers sworn to serve them. Each cover up betrays honorable cops who keep their oath. This case must drive real change or nothing improves." After criminal proceedings ended, Angela Price pressed the civil case. The result, a landmark $25 million settlement against the city and department. The David Carter Foundation for Police Accountability and Reform was born. Carter retired from active duty to lead it, converting grief and discipline into structure, programs, and relentless lawful pressure. The foundation focused on 3 pillars: independent oversight with real authority, legal resources for families harmed by misconduct, and training that confronts implicit bias and teaches de escalation as muscle memory. Partnerships formed across jurisdictions, data dashboards tracked outcomes. For once, reform wasn't a press release, it was budgets, benchmarks, and teeth. Captain Frank Reynolds and 3 supervising officers faced charges for concealing Miller's prior misconduct. Under federal oversight, the department accepted sweeping reforms, complete retraining, mandatory body-worn cameras, and a civilian review board with real subpoena power. Members of Phoenix shifted to permanent roles. Ortiz as executive director, Kim over data, Gaines designing training. Half a year into Miller's sentence, Carter requested a private meeting with Lauren Miller and her daughter, Emma. They met in a small conference room at the foundation. Lauren's arms circled Emma's shoulders, protective and tense. Carter explained a scholarship program for children affected by misconduct, including families of convicted officers. Lauren's suspicion was plain. Why help us after what he did to your son? Carter's face stayed composed, grief visible at the edges. Because punishing innocent family members solves nothing. Emma didn't choose his actions. Her future shouldn't be collateral damage. The words loosened, something Lauren had braced tight for months. As the Foundation's reach grew, the footage of David's killing, once pure outrage, became curriculum. Academies folded it into training on traffic stop procedures, bias recognition, and decision making under stress. Recruits watched the consequences unfold frame by frame. The module ended with policies, not platitudes, steps to prevent repetition, metrics to confirm change. On the first anniversary, Carter visited the grave alone. He set fresh flowers and laid David's framed medical school acceptance beside the headstone. In the quiet, he allowed the rarest thing, a public tear. "We did it, son," he whispered. The system hadn't won. He still didn't feel anything like victory. As he turned to leave, his phone rang, news that braided grief with irony. A student named Tyler, a classmate of Emma's, had information about David. He revealed David had volunteered as a tutor at an after school program serving local teens, including several of Emma's friends who struggled with math and science. David never mentioned the connection, perhaps not realizing he was helping kids inside the social orbit of the officer's daughter. Late that evening, Carter studied photos, David leaning over worksheets, laughing with students. A few familiar faces stared back, friends Emma recognized. The irony bent cruelly, but pointed toward purpose, not despair. The man who killed David had shattered a life already touching his child's circle. Carter refused to let bitterness calcify. Instead, he expanded youth programs, forging mentorships where trust ran thin between neighborhoods and police. Students gained tutors, internships, and paid fellowships, concrete bridges built from evidence, not slogans or speeches. They named it David Mentorship, developing agency, voice, integrity, and direction. The program paired teens with scientists, medical students, and community leaders. Officers enrolled in parallel seminars learned to listen before lecturing. Outcomes were tracked publicly. Graduation rates up, complaint rates down, conversations happening where silence and suspicion had lived for years. Within months, demand outpaced capacity. Volunteers from universities signed up, clinicians offered office hours, retired engineers taught circuitry, teen participants earned microgrants for community projects, then presented findings to city officials. Meanwhile, officers completing the parallel coursework rode along unarmed with outreach workers, observing how credibility grows from patience, humility, and presence. Neighborhood forums followed. Parents, pastors, business owners, and youth sat with facilitators, mapping specific harms and concrete fixes, lighting, mediation spaces, slower stop protocols, transparent complaint tracking. The most stubborn skeptics didn't change overnight, but they stayed in the room because the process was theirs and results finally lived on paper. Did Gregory Miller deserve life without parole? Or is there a better path to justice? Tell us what accountability should mean when power is abused. If Carter's disciplined, lawful strategy resonates, share why. Real reform needs public will, voices willing to demand more than anger, willing to insist on structure. Subscribe for more true stories that test our assumptions about race, safety, and the institutions shaping daily life. Share this episode with someone undecided about police accountability. Sometimes the right story, told with facts and focus, changes minds faster than statistics. Build momentum with us, steady, lawful, relentless, until outcomes move. Thank you for walking through a painful journey with purpose. If this changed how you think about justice, tap like so others find it. We're building a library of cases where accountability came from planning, not rage. Help us grow a community that prizes discipline, truth, and results over spectacle. This narrative shows how insular protection can shield misconduct until confronted by equal or greater institutional force. Carter's response proves emotion isn't enough. Coordinated legality matters. Reform survives when it's codified into budgets, oversight, and training, not slogans. Systems change when disciplined people refuse to blink, documenting reality until denial collapses. Accountability without vengeance is the standard. Carter insisted on it when he spared a man who killed his son, because dead martyrs fuel myths while living defendants face facts. True justice targets structures, closes loopholes, and teaches future officers another way. Saving a life served reform better than ending one. Preparation, resources, and strategy matter. Carter's contingency existed before tragedy, built from experience and a clear eyed view of risk. For communities long dismissed, organization beats outrage. Build networks, learn policy, document everything. Power respects fluency in process, hearings, filings, audits, more than hashtags. That's where durable victories are won. If injustice strikes someone you love, what will you choose? A path that burns fast and fades, or one that holds institutions to their own rules? Carter chose the latter, even when it hurt. Tell us how you'd respond, and what support your community needs to pursue accountability without violence. If this story resonated, help others find it. Like, subscribe, and share. We'll keep documenting difficult truths with receipts and reforms, not rumors. Stand with people insisting on the long work, policy, training, budgets, enforcement. That's how grieving families become builders, and how systems finally learn to protect everyone equally. Thank you for staying to the end of a hard, necessary journey. Stories can move hearts where spreadsheets cannot. Courage lives in persistence, not noise. May we all find the will to demand fairness, safeguard dignity, and keep pushing calmly, lawfully together until justice becomes ordinary, not miraculous. When the neighborhood looked like a movie set, floodlights glaring, rotors chopping the night air, police bullhorns echoing off final sighting, the grieving father had every reason to demand a pound of flesh. He did not. In that most volatile hour, he chose law over rage. He kept the man who killed his son alive so due process could do what vengeance never can: establish truth, assign responsibility, and set a public record that cannot be explained away. That restraint wasn't weakness. It was the steel of a leader who has seen too much blood to let a single more drop fall without purpose. If you're 65 or older, you've watched the country turn more than a few hard corners. You know the rhythm of fear, anger, and escalation. You remember the crackle of a police radio, the cold click of a landline disconnect, the trembling relief when crisis ends without a funeral. In that standoff, the father understood a simple, old fashioned lesson our grandparents taught us: control yourself first. He refused to bargain with fury. He spoke with a calm voice trained by years of service, and he offered a path out for a man who had offered his son none. Why? Because a corpse cannot testify, a martyr can be mythologized, and a gunfire ending would have muddied the facts for decades. A living defendant, a courtroom, a jury sworn under oath, those are the tools that shift culture. The choice to save a life didn't erase the crime, it magnified the responsibility. It told the country, we mean accountability, not blood. For older Americans who've seen the cycle: outrage, headlines, then silence, the father's decision shows a deeper kind of power. He protected the community from a shootout, saved the officers on the perimeter from a nightmare they'd never forget, and preserved evidence that would stand up in court, not just online. He shepherded a volatile midnight back toward morning, step by careful step. That is how we win ground that stays won. The second lesson is less dramatic, but more decisive. Change favors the prepared. Long before the blue lights flooded that cul-de-sac, the father had built a plan. He had a trusted circle, a legal team on call, and a process for preserving evidence. He knew which phone to dial, which document to file, and which door to knock on. From the district attorney's office to the police commissioner's paneled room downtown, he had a timetable, not a temper. If you've ever managed a household budget, a church committee, or a small business, you know the truth here. Outcomes follow habits. He insisted on plain facts, recorded timelines, and clean chains of custody. He demanded that reform be more than speeches. In court, he wanted sworn testimony. In City Hall, he wanted written directives with dates, not vague promises attached to ribbon cuttings. His team traced the money that insulated misconduct: settlement pools, union funds, legal defenses, and forced those streams into sunlight. That is how systems move. You chart where the dollars go. where the signatures land, and where the loopholes live. Then you close them one by one. Older Americans also recognized the patience in this lesson. The father did not seek showdowns, he built coalitions. He cultivated insiders willing to tell the truth, officers who had seen patterns but felt outnumbered. He asked for reform with teeth, body worn cameras, independent review boards with subpoena power, retraining with real hours and real tests, not slogans, standards, not press conferences, policies. If you've ever waited 6 months for a permit or stood in line at the DMV, you know the power of process and how important it is to master it rather than rage against it. There was theater in the story, blackouts, helicopters, headlines, but the real drama was paperwork, properly filed, and evidence preserved. A grand jury moved because a binder of facts was airtight. A trial lasted 3 weeks because experts dismantled bad explanations with clocks, angles, and medical science. Sentencing carried weight because the record was complete. When the verdict came, first-degree murder, it was not the victory of a louder voice. It was the victory of preparation, documented truth, and a father's refusal to let bureaucracy shrug and move on. For those in their late 60s and beyond, this lesson affirms something you've preached to younger generations. Write it down, keep the receipts. Know the rules better than the people who hope you don't. The father turned heartbreak into a manual. He made law the lever and patience the fulcrum. And the system, creaky and stubborn, finally leaned. The final lesson may be the hardest and the most American. After the trial and the sentence, the father created a foundation. He didn't just talk reform, he funded it. He built scholarships, legal clinics, and training modules that turned outrage into craft. Then he did something that startled everyone. He offered help to the officer's family. He refused to punish a child for her father's crime. He chose building over breaking. If you're 65 plus, you understand the cost and the reward of that decision. Maybe you remember neighbors bringing casseroles during a hard winter, or a church potluck where the widower found his smile again because someone saved him a seat. Our country has survived its hardest seasons when people who are hurt refuse to become people who hurt. The father saw a daughter who didn't choose her father's actions, and a mother trying to hold what was left of a household. He extended a hand, not to erase harm, but to protect hope. That is not softness. That is strength that outlasts the moment. His foundation took the raw video that shocked the nation and turned it into curriculum. New officers studied not only what went wrong, but how to prevent it, how to slow a stop, how to speak plainly, how to read hands before writing reports. The program measured outcomes, not clicks or likes, but fewer complaints, fewer injuries, fewer funerals. That is how we know the needle moved, not by noise, but by numbers. And then came the twist only life can write. The son who died had been tutoring kids connected to the officer's own daughter. The two worlds, the grieving family and the family that caused the grief, were already touching through algebra worksheets and after-school snacks. When that truth surfaced, the father didn't curse the sky. He expanded the mentorships. He invited teens and officers into the same rooms, not to lecture, but to listen. He funded internships and paid fellowships so young people could see a future wider than the blocks they were born on. He asked officers to ride along with outreach workers, unarmed, to watch how trust is built by showing up on time, learning names, and keeping your word. This is a lesson seasoned Americans can carry to the next generation. Civic healing is not a speech, it is a practice. We meet in the church basement, the VFW hall, the high school cafeteria. We sit in metal chairs that wobble, pass around store-bought cookies, and talk until the heat goes out of our voices. We write down the next steps, install lighting, publish stop data, fund the youth center, train the trainers, and then we show up again next month to see if the bolts were actually tightened. The father's story reminds us that compassion and accountability are not rivals. In fact, one makes the other possible. He insisted the officer face the law, and he insisted the officer's daughter face a future that wasn't ruined by his crime. He asked for reforms with budgets, not just promises. He modeled leadership as service, not spotlight, and when the first anniversary came, he visited his son's grave with flowers and a letter of acceptance to medical school, quiet proof that love can carry purpose farther than anger ever will. For readers in their retirement years, here is the invitation this lesson gives you. Your wisdom is a public resource. You know how neighborhoods can change when a few steady people decide to stay, to coach, to mentor, to count votes at school board meetings, and count receipts at budget time. You understand that nothing real shifts until someone reliable takes attendance and minutes. You are exactly the generation that can keep reforms from fading when the headlines move on. So the three lessons are simple, and they are tough. One, choose justice, not vengeance, when the moment burns hottest. Two, prepare and document. Systems bow to precision and patience. Three, build bridges, even when bitterness begs for a wall, especially for the innocent caught in the blast zone. If we hold to those, our country will remember how to fix what it breaks, and the next father who gets a midnight call may still weep, but he may not need a plan called Phoenix to make the truth stick. If this story and its three lessons, choosing justice over vengeance, mastering the system with preparation, and building bridges where anger wants walls, spoke to you, would you add your voice? In the comments, tell us what part moved you most, and what practical step would you take in your town, church, or neighborhood this month to turn outrage into results? If you found value here, please like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs hope and a plan. Your interaction helps more people discover proven ways to seek accountability without violence, steady, lawful, and lasting.